of our class because today Mr. Eric Peterson is here to talk to you about his experiences during World War II and his experiences liberating the concentration camp Ohrdruf. And he has been coming here, I think we figured out, maybe 5 years. And you're just so lucky because this is something that you'll be able to tell your kids and your grandkids, that you met someone who was in D-Day, who was, I know, you'll tell them more about how it's later than the first day. But anyway, who also fought in all of these battles for our freedom in World War II. And he's just one of the nicest people you would ever meet. So this is Mr. Eric Peterson.
Thanks for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today and see all your smiling faces. And I am not a teacher, I am not a speaker, I am not a historian. I'm not much of anything, am I? I'm just a 91-year-old veteran of the European Theater of Operations. And like I say, I'm 91, but my wife is 98. A lot of people wonder why I married an older woman. But there's a lot of good tunes in an old fiddle. So, let it go at that. I was inducted, to tell my story, I usually tell my story of my life as a soldier in the United States Army. Mine was a little different, I think. When I was inducted in March of 1941, when there was a peacetime draft. And they put me in the medical corps, the 1209 Station Hospital at Pine Camp, New York. I even got a picture of me in my hospital uniform, so I can prove that I was in the medical corps. And I was in there for a whole year, and then I wanted to get out with the boys. So I requested a transfer to the 4th Armored Division, and I got it. And there I went into this 4th Armored Division, the 35th Tank Battalion. And I had no basic training, but I didn't need any. I could keep up with the rest of the boys anyway. And to make a long story short, I might tell a funny little story there too. While I was at Pine Camp, me and some buddies was at PX, which is the post exchange, where we could sit at the counter and get hamburgers and milkshakes or whatnot. And there was a civilian young lady behind the counter waiting on us. And this soldier walks in and sits down. He says, "I want 2 slices of bread." Well, the gal behind the counter says, "What do you want between the bread?" He says, "Nothing, just give me 2 slices of bread." Well, she thought that was strange, so she gave him 2 slices of bread, and he reaches in his jacket, pulls out one of these leapfrogs, one with the long ones, the green ones that live in swamps, and he slapped that between the 2 slices of bread, and goes like that. Well, that frog didn't want to be eaten alive, so he jumps out between the bread and lands behind the counter. Well, that young gal was scared, skinny, of course, and she picks up her skirt and gets up on the counter. And there we were sitting. Well, to our delight, that was really funny. We were really laughing and enjoying ourselves. So he goes behind the counter and gets the frog, and he does the same thing again. Out leaps that leapfrog. So he goes behind the counter, gets it, puts it back in his jacket, and walks out. Never cracked a smile. And we were just dying laughing. Anyhow, that's some of the humor that goes along with Army life. It's strange. Anyhow, we went on maneuvers in Tennessee, and when I went to the 35th Tank Battalion, they gave me a Jeep and put me in the reconnaissance platoon. And when we were on maneuvers, the colonel's his Jeep broke down, and I happened to be close by, so the battalion commander says, Peterson, I gotta get up at the head of this line of tanks in a hurry. So he gets in the front seat of my Jeep and the radio operator gets in the back, and I told him to hang on. And I gave him a ride. I got him up at the front of that line of tanks in a hurry, and then he turned around to the radio operator and says, now I know who is going to drive the command half-track in combat. So 3 days later, I was called into the headquarters, and I was given the half-track. And that's what I drove through the whole war. There's pictures of me and my half-track. Hey, you can pass some of these around if you want to. While I'm talking, you can hey, look, that's what a half-track is. Maybe some of you don't know what a half-track is, but if you want to know what a half-track is, here's one right here. There's wheels in the front and tracks in the back, and that's what I drove all during the war, the command vehicle. And we were on Mojave Desert in California for 6 months, living in tents. And then we went to Camp Bowie, Texas. Was there for 6 months. And then we boarded ship on Christmas Day, 43, shipped out of Boston for England. And we had a zigzag clear across the Atlantic Ocean to avoid the German U-boats because they would just love to sink our ships. Anyhow, we were in Devizes, England for 6 months training before the invasion. Of course, you all know that the invasion was June 6th, 1944, and when it was my turn to board an LST, which is a landing ship tank, to go across the English Channel, we landed at Utah Beach. The Americans had 2 beaches, as you probably know, Utah Beach and Omaha Beach. And Omaha Beach was a terribly hard thing to do. It was much worse than Utah Beach. And of course, General Eisenhower was there to talk to all of us men before we crossed the channel. And incidentally, I got married while I was in the Army, while we were stationed in California. My wife was 6 months pregnant when I went overseas. So I didn't get to see my little baby. Excuse me. Until she was 14 months old. That was kind of hard. In every battle and every day, I wondered if I'd ever get to see my little baby. But I did. Somebody was watching over me. We were in Patton, General Patton's 3rd Army. You probably have heard of General George S. Patton, Jr. We were in the St. Lo breakthrough where there was over 2,000 airplanes came over, bombers, to bomb the Germans' front lines so that we could break out with our tanks. And the ground just shook like that for a couple hours. The bombing was such a terrific thing. It's just something you can't imagine. But anyhow, it softened up the German lines so that we could break through with our tanks. We had some tank drivers that were just fabulous. One of the things, when we neared the city of Troyes, they had dug ditches around the city they called them tank traps. They were expecting our tankers to come to those big ditches and then just stop, and then we'd be shooting ducks. But our tankers were a little bit smarter than that, and instead of putting on the brakes when we got to those ditches, they just stepped on the gas, and we just flew right through those ditches and surrounded that city, and the Germans just couldn't believe that we did that. That was our big, how we went to war. We were surprising those Germans all the time. We did things that they thought we could not do. We were down in southern France, where it was real muddy and wet, and you probably have heard of the Battle of the Bulge. The military name for it is the Ardennes Forest Offensive. Eisenhower called Patton and his other generals up to his headquarters to find out what we could do to rescue the 101st Airborne, because they were encircled in Bastogne, Belgium. And Patton told him to give him 48 hours and he'd have his Third Army up there ready for battle. Eisenhower said it practically impossible, but he knew that if anybody could do it, Patton could. So he gave Patton the go-ahead, but we got word immediately to gas up and head north. Don't stop until we get to Bastogne. And Patton, when he says he's going to do something, he does it. We were up there in 48 hours, ready for battle. But it was quite a change from the weather in France, and then get up there at Bastogne. It was snow and cold and bitter. By the time we got up there, in a half-track, you've only got a slit like this to see through to drive. The rest is all armor. And by the time I got up there, my eyes were swollen shut. I laid down and tried to get a little rest, and it snowed during the night, so I had to shake the snow off of me, and then tried to open my eyes. I couldn't open my eyes. They were swollen shut. I had to take cold water out of my canteen and pour over my eyes before I could open them at all. Anyhow, we were ready for battle at sunrise after 48 hours, just like Patton said he would do. And incidentally, we were just south, working our way up toward Bastogne on Christmas Day of 44. Patton was just about 6 feet from me on Christmas Day. He was up there to see. And I'll tell you the exact words he said. He just put his hands up over his head and said, "Give him hell, boys, give him hell." That's the way Patton, that's the way he talks. He's rough, but a wonderful general. He's my hero of the war. Even Eisenhower said we could not have won that war without General Patton. We finally broke through the German lines, and our tanks of the 4th Armored Division were the first ones to break into Bastogne. And our Combat Command A under Colonel Creighton Abrams was the first tanks in there. So the modern tanks is the Abrams tanks. It's named after Colonel Creighton Abrams of the 4th Armored Division, because we were the first ones to break through there. It's time for a little bit of humor, I think, before I continue. While I was still in the States, it was New Year's Day, and the officers were having a New Year's Eve party that evening. And this major approached me and asked me to be a bartender at their party for that night. Well, I didn't know how to mix a drink or anything, and he said, just give him something. He says, they don't know what they're drinking after a while anyway.